Welcome to Haunt Weekly.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Crystal.
And this is Haunt Weekly, a weekly podcast for the haunted attraction and entertainment community. Whether you're an actor, owner, or just plain aficionado, we aim to be a podcast for you. And we return to you this week with a guide. We're going to tell you how to write a ghost story, which we're going to get into in more detail. It's a little different from a backstory, but we're going to get into it in just a little bit. Hopefully this will be educational and helpful, as I know a lot of you all are working on your haunt backstories and lore as we speak. But if that is not what you need, please check out all of our other episodes. You can find us at hauntweekly.com or hauntweekly on Twitter, hauntweekly on Facebook, and youtube.com/hauntweekly. You can also catch us wherever your podcasts are found. And to start off with, most weeks at least, we didn't do it last week because we kind of took last week off, and by that I mean use content we pre-recorded. But usually we ask a question of the week, and last time's question of the week was, what are you most looking forward to in the 2023 haunt season? And boy, did y'all show up for this one. Ryan Greger said he's looking forward to having a new house to haunt up, figuring out a new layout, and getting a feel for the neighborhood. Be sure to make kind with all your neighbors now.
Take them goodies and flyers. Amanda Hughes said, trying some new elements in my act, a lot of stuff you guys suggested, like having more lines to react to the off-the-wall interactions I have, trying to make it more creepy and unnerving, as I'm going to have to be largely out in the open with people and not a brief interaction scene, so a long scene. Those are more difficult.
Indeed.
Really developing character, and that I actually get to be my character this year, which I haven't done in forever.
That sounds great.
It does.
Nicholas Vox? I have no idea. I apologize, Nicholas. Says, lack of sleep, not really. Really much more interested in getting a good paycheck, which I understand that.
Yeah. Micah Arnold said, reopening my haunt and using my found haunt knowledge, so this year isn't a complete mess.
Newfound haunt knowledge.
Yeah, complete mess with 5 different themes. Because of you guys, my haunt is going to be 10 times better. Well, thank you very much,
Well, thank you very
Micah.
much. I'm glad we were able to help somebody. I don't think it'll be 10 times better, but you know what? I do like the idea of having a consistent theme. And if it's 10 times better, it's because you made it 10 times better. It has nothing to do with us.
Exactly.
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
That's a much better way to say that. Darren Fowler said their haunt is celebrating 49 years this year.
Which is awesome.
And here's the thing. They are the West Springs Spook House in upstate South Carolina. I actually mapped it. They are 25 minutes away from my grandfather's house. Where my mom grew up in Woodruff, South Carolina. So, and I've spent a lot of time in that region, and I obviously I've never been to it, because I never visited haunted attractions in that area, but I can almost guarantee I've been by the place at some point. Anyways.
Right. Sean Fenner said, complete remodeling of one of our attractions. Looking forward to the public being able to see it. I understand that so much.
That's such a great feeling to have something new to show. It really is. Craig Watt, hopefully make a profit.
And Drew Badger said cooler.
All right. Ooh, go ahead.
Drew Badger said cooler temps. Like no fucking shit.
Yeah, but there's a mighty big assumption there will be cooler temps.
I know.
Just like assuming that I will not choke on my liquid as I drink it. But anyways, that brings us to this week's question of the week, and it's quite a simple one. What is your favorite ghost story? Let us know. HauntWeekly.com, HauntWeekly on Twitter, Facebook.com/HauntWeekly, and YouTube.com/HauntWeekly. We'd love to hear your thoughts and get the answer to the question. But my favorite ghost story has always been The Gray Ghost. Still choking slightly. Sorry about that. But basically, it's a ghost along the coast of South Carolina that would supposedly warn people of hurricanes before we had like the National Weather Service and that kind of shit. And we had actual warning of hurricanes. If the ghost appeared, you got the fuck out, basically. And I like that story because it's simple. And
the ghost isn't harmful. It's actually a very helpful ghost in that scenario.
It's the most helpful ghost. This kicks the shit out of Casper.
Uh-huh.
Fuck you, Casper. You're not a friendly ghost. You never saved anyone from a hurricane.
Mm-hmm. And I do like that type of ghost story. There are a lot of stories around, spirits congregating around bodies of water and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of research into this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't really have a favorite ghost story. I mean, the first thing that came to mind was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but that's really a legend, not a ghost story.
But it is also a ghost story.
As we will get into, those can cross over.
Yes. So actually, no, I don't think that's a bad answer. It's a very good ghost story, and I do think it's a ghost story.
Mm-hmm.
Because in
the end, it is.
Yeah. Because the actual Legend of Sleepy Hollow is in and of itself a ghost story.
Yeah.
It's just a ghost story, sometimes wrapped in a ghost story.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, once again, let us know all the places we mentioned. All right, first things first, we have a pair of updates. One which feeds us into this topic. The one that does not is we finally got to go by a spirit.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, there were some props that had an unexpected element.
Yeah. I will say this, the animatronics still look like they're crappily built. These all looked incredibly lightweight and cheesily built.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine any of them surviving any significant usage without major repairs. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could even though we were there like a week after they opened this place, some of them are already broken.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
Well, they were either broken or not turned on fully.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which, because we were there a week after opening.
Fair point. But yeah, but you could tell with the ones that were moving that it was very cheap and lightweight. And like you could see like the frames shaking as it moved around and things. And you just know that's going to create problems. But they were very creative. There was two that I remember well. One was a clown that had no legs, was kind of doing a push-up on its hands and was vertical. And I'm like, okay, what's this one going to do? And then the whole body starts turning. I genuinely did not expect that motion with that.
Yeah, and it looked like a topsy-turvy doll.
And then there was a Grim Reaper type who moved his arm and exposed basically a whole ass other person.
Yeah, which I think that could really be incorporated into a haunt, but using actor.
Yeah.
Like maybe have the motion of the bigger prop be a prop and a mechanical thing, but have an actor actually hiding inside instead of the other dummy.
Yeah, it was a very, very effective hiding job they did on that. You could tell they put some thought into it. Like I said, it was $300 for him. I'm not paying that.
Yeah, whoever designed it did a great job.
Yeah, but I'm 100% sure that, like I said, these are not going to last. They also had some really good decor. If you're wanting just some like home decor.
Yeah, I kind of want to buy all of it. I'm not going to. But.
Especially if you like the pop culture touchstones that were big this year there that I can recall was Nightmare Before Christmas, always, Ghostbusters, Haunted Mansion, which that goes with the new movie.
Yep.
Beetlejuice, which I think is in the run up to the sequel, because isn't the new Beetlejuice movie due out sometime soon? Mm. And then, for reasons unclear, I think it's like the 30th anniversary or something, but Killer Clowns from Outer Space was also huge.
Yeah, and Mars Attacks was everywhere, too.
Oh, that's right. Mars Attacks was, too. You're right.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anything about a reboot of that or something.
Yeah, it may be an anniversary for that, too.
Yeah.
But, no, I mean, so, yeah, there was a lot of great decor items. It was not what I would consider great pricing, but it wasn't horrible either on it. I think we bought a mask that we were interested in playing around with and trying to see if we could work on and improve. And I think we bought a couple other things, but for a lot of it, my attitude is just kind of wait until November and buy it off the site if you like it. Mm-hmm. The bad news from Spirit was that we asked about the prospect of leaving flyers, which this has been a big tradition for us at Halloween to leave flyers there. And we were not able to last year because there was no Spirit.
Right.
No spirit opened geographically close to us.
Yeah.
The ones that opened in the area all opened about 30 minutes away, minimum. So yeah, but they said no flyers.
Mm-hmm.
That they're not going to take any. Now, my plan is to come back in September and see if the other haunts are leaving flyers. And if the other haunts are leaving flyers, then I'm pretty sure we can find a way to make it work.
Yeah, exactly.
But if they're not, that would really hurt in my mind. Because I remember, even growing up, Spirit was the place you would go to learn about what haunts were opening that year. You would go and see flyers. You would see
whatever the local costume shop
Oh, yeah, the costume
is.
shop in general, yeah.
And unfortunately for us, this is the one on the West Bank because they put the other one out of business.
Yeah.
So this is what we've got, and we can't work with them, at least, or not right now.
Not right now. So we're going to see how that happens. We've been told that before and ended up working out. Next, we do need to go by Home Depot and Lowe's, apparently, though.
Well, I've been checking our local ones, and nothing's in stock yet. And I think it's because we're still in hurricane season, and they're, selling generators and shit for hurricanes.
Fair point. But we also took another trip. And this one's one that does lean into our story right now. We took a trip to the Slidell Historical Museum. For those that don't know, New Orleans sits at the bottom of a giant lake called Lake Pontchartrain.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a town to the east and north, slightly, of New Orleans called Slidell. It's right across the lake. It's a town that we found out is about as old as New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Though not in terms of when it was what's the term? Incorporated. But in terms of people living there, it has about the same history as New Orleans.
Right, it grew up in tandem.
Yeah, it grew in tandem, not because of New Orleans, which I found very interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the reason we went there was because we mentioned in the last news episode 400, that the Mall of America picked Onionhead, a Slidell legend, for their theme, and so we wanted to goes, and they said they had an exhibit there on their site.
Right.
Well, let's go learn more about Onionhead and maybe talk about it. We ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of Gregory.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful guy, very, very enthusiastic about this history.
Yes. I think Gregory was also maybe a little bit lonely and just really happy to see people.
Yeah.
Because we met up actually with some friends from the area who had spent a weekend in that same 2-block zone and had no idea there was a museum there.
Yeah, I don't know how far back the guest book went, but it didn't seem to have... Seriously, if you're in Slidell, go pay the museum a visit. Yeah. It's free, apparently.
Yeah.
And it was...
And it's cash donations and cash charges if you want to buy any of their merch.
But it's a very cool museum, and I do actually encourage people to go. One thing I learned, and this is a complete aside from the podcast, but this has been in my brain a lot lately, is that we learned about the Sullivan-Salem marriage. It was a marriage between Fritz Salem and William Sullivan. It took place in 1922 in Slidell, and it was supposedly the wedding of the century. Mm-hmm. And as Gregory looked into it, and other historians looked into it, it wasn't just the wedding of the century for Slidell.
Right.
It was the wedding of the century, full stop. It was a big, huge power broker wedding. Thousands of people, and this was at a time when the only way to get a place like Slidell was by train, and train was not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was not super convenient. Thousands of people came. It was a big, huge deal. There were film crews, all this stuff. And then in a few decades after, it was forgotten.
Yeah.
By the 1960s, so just less than 4 decades later, people forgot about it. And now, 101 years later, you could barely even find information on it.
Yeah.
You have to really hunt.
Yeah, I tried to find some information on it and see any actual photos or anything like that.
Yeah, I found some Old Times Picayune articles. I found some old newspaper articles.
Yeah, but it was really scarce.
Yeah. And it's amazing that something so big happened with significant international coverage completely lost to history within 100 years.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
But yes, we did end up learning about Onionhead too. And basically what I didn't know was you have to ask if you want to learn about Onionhead.
Right, because apparently the photograph is very upsetting for young children and anybody who's scared.
And as I mentioned to Gregory, we run a haunted house. We know age is like the worst predictor of how people will react when subject to anything mildly horrifying.
Yeah.
It is literally the worst predictor I can think of, because I have seen, I've seen 2-year-olds go through our haunt wanting to pet all of our scary monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen, people in their 40s and 50s collapse and assume that this is their impending death. But anyways, but you have to ask about it if you do go and you do want to hear more about Onion. But the first thing I learned was that the legend has traveled all over the world.
Yeah.
I did not realize that.
No, because Gregory found about it when doing research in South America.
Yeah.
And he was like, there's something called Onionhead that's from Slidell. Well, there's lots of Slidells all over the world. Oh, Slidell, Louisiana. That's where I'm researching.
Yeah. So and he's also found versions of it in like Asia, and Europe and elsewhere. So this legend has traveled the globe. Mm-hmm. And in fact, in many ways, it may be better known outside of Slidell than within Slidell in some ways.
Yeah. Now, I will say that in September, October, with the Mall of America doing its thing, which the Slidell Museum had not heard about, by the way, I would totally lean into this, because all of the exhibits are in jail cells. Well, okay. Most of them are in jail cells.
This is a converted old jail.
Yeah. So I would take one of the cells, put a curtain up so that if people don't want to be scared, they don't have to be scared. But then put, a dummy in there with a mask that looks similar, and the legends from all over the world, because there's little differences in each. Mm-hmm. And put all of that around and make it spooky and swamp sounds and stuff in there.
Yeah.
And make it a feature attraction.
Yeah, make it a reason to come by the museum. Mm-hmm. I think that could be really, really good. And I mean, I don't know if there are any haunted attractions in the Slidell area anymore. There was one for a time. Mm-hmm. I don't think there is one now.
I don't either.
But yeah, so yeah, I just But the thing about it was, thinking about Onionhead and thinking about that story, and we're going to repeat the Onionhead legend, at least in some detail, at the end of this, and you'll see why in a minute. We're bringing it all back around to this. We're all coming back here, and I don't want to tell the story twice. But yeah, I thought that the Onionhead legend, despite having some complexities and issues, is a good example of how to write a compelling ghost story, and apparently have it travel the goddamn world. Mm-hmm. So basically, there are 5 elements of a good ghost story, and we're going to go through them one by one. And the first one is the kernel of truth. Basically, to me, in my mind, this is actually the most important step. But every ghost story needs a kernel of truth. Basically, this is a hook that makes the story feel believable. Mm-hmm. This is what, and what this is can vary from place to place and and story to story. One easy place to always look is local history. Mm-hmm. New Orleans, this is super easy.
Yeah, most places it is, because there are disasters or tragic deaths.
We're getting there.
I know.
But yeah.
I'm jumping the gun.
But basically, you have disasters, you have here in New Orleans, you have plagues, you have fires, you have floods. And it's going all the way back through history. You can get all the way back to the 1700s on this. And very easily. So basically, you can just start a story with a historical event that everyone knows is true. Use that as your jumping off point.
Yeah.
And Bob's your uncle. Now, we do this with our haunt backstories. And to be real quick about this, the way I'm looking at a ghost story versus a backstory is that a backstory has the specific function of explaining your haunt, creating context for your haunt. A ghost story is meant to be retold and shared on its own. Now, there's a lot of overlap between the two, but there are some differences we're going to get into. But the main thing is, a ghost story can be part of a haunt backstory. In fact, it probably should be. That way your haunt backstory gets retold. Yeah. And then when you present it as the backstory, people are already somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah, I think one of the oddest conversations I've ever had at a haunt con was two women who were looking to open a haunted house. And I'm like, well, what's the legend in your town?
And what's the scary legend? Yeah.
Yeah. And there was something about a chicken.
It was a headless chicken or something
It
like
was
that.
it was a headless chicken, and the guy, and there was a swindler involved, and
There was real complicated lore around the headless chicken.
Exactly. But anyway, it was a really wild story, but we sat there for about 15-20 minutes and talked about the legend and how they could incorporate it if that's what they wanted to go with their haunt story. But it was also a ghost story because the townspeople found out that the swindler had swindled and killed him.
Yeah.
And then the ghost of chickens ran everywhere.
Here's what I found.
No one asked you, Siri. Another good source are any local legends which are currently told as truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this one can vary. I mean, obviously a ghost story built on a ghost story is a bad idea, but there's always local legends that get told as if they're truth, and people genuinely believe. Cryptozoology is actually a really interesting area to explore here, because like some cryptozoology nobody believes, but some cryptozoology at least a significant percentage of people in the area seem to be convinced it happened. I was around when Lizard Man was a thing in South Carolina. You know, I've seen this happen firsthand. But the other kind of truth is the truth that's just true to the person. You know, that we can all relate to. Things that make us all uneasy. For example, so many ghost stories start with driving alone on a stormy night. Something like that. Or being alone at a place without cell signal or any way to get help. Things that make us all uneasy, but are things that we all know to be true. Things that we know we have experienced and felt, even if maybe that specific incident did not happen. So you can speak to a sort of an internal, a deeper truth as well. But basically, find something that is true or speaks to the audience's individual truth. You can take either of those approaches, and I think both can work equally as well. I'll say one thing: if you want the story to travel outside the immediate area, going for that personal truth is probably better. Something that everyone can relate to, something that's more universal.
Yeah.
But for a haunt which is geographically limited, it may be better to go with local history, just because A, you know your audience will be familiar with it, and B, you know, it's something easily connectable. And you're not really trying to reach every man, woman, and child across the world. No, you don't have to reach people in South America and Asia.
Right.
Onionhead just did.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
the second item.
A tragedy.
Tragedy.
Yes. Every ghost story has a tragedy, and we heard all about tragic deaths on a ghost tour in Charleston.
Yeah. God, that was so terrible.
Yes, and if your tragedy has a kernel of truth, be careful.
Yeah. Because basically you want to make sure that your ghost story isn't causing any actual harm to someone, whether it's the actual person involved or a relative or a loved one or even a close descendant.
Right.
And we had this incident a while back. We actually did an episode on about the Bloody Mary tours, where they were doing a ghost tour of a grisly murder that happened in 2005. And this was several years ago. We saw this. This was like barely 15 years after the incident happened.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it made 10.
Yeah.
And it had been open for a little while.
Yeah. It was horrible. And we knew people that knew the people involved.
Yeah, exactly. And it wound up getting media coverage because, you know, we talked about it with our friends who knew the people involved.
Yeah,
so,
it blew up fairly big. So yeah, make sure that if your tragedy is the kernel of truth, that you're not causing more harm. You're not adding to the already tragic situation.
Right.
That said, though, that tragedy can be just about anything. I mean, basically, the idea is that something bad happens to either a neutral or a good person or a good group of people. You know, though, to warn, if having a group of people may depersonalize the story some, and once again, this may hurt the retelling of it, because people like to tell and share stories about that are more relatable.
Right, and this is one of the reasons why ghost stories may not be as good as backstories to work with in haunts, because it usually does center around one person instead of a group of people.
Yeah.
Now, this one person could be your lead character who recruits all these other people.
Yeah. But yeah, this is one of the key differences between a ghost story and a backstory. With a backstory, you're trying to put the audience, lots of people, into the scene.
Yeah.
And that's kind of hard to do with a story that only involves an individual person.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it is that individual person is now doing the haunting, for example. But every good ghost story has to have this element of tragedy. And to be clear, it doesn't have to be human-caused tragedy.
Nope.
I just talked about the gray lady. She was killed in a hurricane.
Yeah, that makes sense. Boom.
Boom, we're done. I mean, there's plenty of natural disasters. There are plenty of accidental deaths that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's always the classic, as we have seen in so many of these stories, died of a broken heart.
Yeah.
Man, so many people die of broken hearts when they aren't candidates for broken heart syndrome. 'Cause broken heart syndrome isn't actually a thing. It's actually a thing.
Yeah.
But that's typically for people who have weaker hearts, usually due to age or some condition, dealing with the stress of losing a loved one.
Yeah.
That does happen. But
yeah. And people do get lost in the woods and die in fires or disappear in various
fall down
ways.
wells and then Lassie can't find them. Things happen. But yeah, a good ghost story needs a good tragedy. It needs something bad to happen to a good, or at the very least, neutral person.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, the supernatural element. Okay, right up until now, we've basically just told a tragic story.
Yeah.
Interesting, perhaps Shakespearean, but not a good ghost story. So, yeah, why is this a ghost story, not just a tragedy? And so basically, why is this haunting taking place today? What is going on? Were there mystic properties of the place? Was it a graveyard that was disturbed? That's a good vague one.
Yeah.
Was it a science experiment gone on? Science is also excellent to pick on for for general ideas.
Yeah.
Was the purpose, or this is something that's more common in Eastern cultures, as I've learned recently, was the person so racked with grief or anger or some other emotion that they just couldn't move on to the next life? What's going on?
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business is a classic, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So be careful when dealing with religion. This is one of the key problems with the Onionhead story we'll get into. But yeah, be careful when dealing with religions. So I would be very hesitant to have like a voodoo priestess put a curse. Now you can say so-and-so put a curse. You know what I mean? Because curses are things in lots of religions.
Well, and you can say I curse you with
Danhausen curse.
Exactly. But it
like 5 people in the podcast got that reference.
But without any, religion behind it.
Yeah, seriously, look up Danhausen. It's awesome. But yeah, you don't have to call out a specific religion. You can have there's a myriad of ways you can have this that doesn't tether it to any one religious view. But yeah, basically this element is just there to explain why this isn't a tragic story, but rather is a ghost story.
It's okay. Next up, we have a connection to the listener.
Yeah, I debated which order to put the last two when I was writing the notes. I think these two are together, but also very important separately. But go ahead.
Right. So this is the chance to lay the groundwork for what's coming up, which is what you were just alluding to. Why should the listeners care? Why should they care right now? Why do they care about your ghost in this moment, in this time?
Yeah.
Because obviously, they're not in the time that the tragedy happened.
No, they weren't there 100 years ago or 200 years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
So
Are they in the same place? Do they look like the same victim? Is it the right time of year, or it has 20 years passed and now the clown's gonna come back?
He comes back every 7 years, 6 months, and 22 days.
Yeah.
He's very specific like that.
At 1,300 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, very specific ghost. I mean, amazingly punctual. It's ridiculous, let me tell you. Yeah, but why should the listener be paying attention and be caring about this haunting right then as you're telling them? Or at whatever time you want them to care about it.
Yeah.
Why should they give a shit?
Mm-hmm.
What is special to them right now? And we accidentally pulled off one of the best versions of this in our haunt. And I'm
Early on.
I am so proud of this and it's just a shame we haven't been able to pull off something similar or pull off something this good. Because basically we had a killer whose idea was, he was the alphabet killer. And there was an actual alphabet killer, but ours worked differently.
Yeah, ours, I think we called him the collector.
Yeah.
But the thing was, he collected skulls with the names of...
The first letter of the name.
The first letter of the name of everybody coming through.
Yeah, they were his victims.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we would do is we had like an altar display with A through Z, but we had 25 skulls.
Exactly.
And so we would try to find a way to get the name of someone in each group, and then someone would go in and just rearrange so that was a blank space.
Exactly.
And I thought this was just going to be a cheeky little thing to make us go, tee, we're being silly.
And nobody would fucking notice.
Thought it'd go right over people's heads.
Because people don't notice details usually. But they fucking noticed that.
And they fucking reacted to that.
Yeah.
Holy shit, Wilbur. That would...
Your letters are not there. Your skull's
They're
not
looking
there.
for Katie. They're looking for...
We're both like pointing frantically at the microphone.
Yeah, you just can't see it, yeah. So yeah, it happens so many times. But that's just it. Why should they care in that moment about this story?
Yeah. Why is it scary to them?
Well, because this imaginary killer, needs your letter to complete the skull collection. Then they have 100% of the video game. They will get the platinum trophy and be able to pass on.
Exactly. They're coming for you.
So yeah, no, that is a compelling reason why that person should care. And the other thing I learned about that is how quickly friends throw each other under the bus in that situation. Because I could hear it outside. They're coming for you, Katie. I'm letting them have you.
Here, it's her. It's her.
It's this one.
She's the one that's Katie.
So many times.
Yeah. People are horrible.
Yes. People are, and it doesn't matter if it's family or friends. They do it all the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the relationship they had coming in the haunt was. What matters is the relationship coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. But yeah, basically give some kind of hook so that they know why they should care right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the final element is, what is their expectation? They care now.
Mm-hmm.
So far, you've got your kernel truth, you've got your tragedy, you've got a supernatural element to make it a ghost story, and now you know why they're caring. What expectation are you setting up with that framework? What should they be looking out for? Because like you said, all that stuff happened in the past.
Yeah.
We have our connection to today now. What's going to happen? Are you going to hear footsteps in the hall?
Oh.
Mm-hmm. You're going to see specters visible in the building.
Mm.
People disappearing. Creepy screams. Shit flying around. Where are we going? What should I expect if I encounter this ghost or experience this ghost story? What should I be expecting? Now, I personally turn to the altar of Japes and agree with his rules on this. One is, don't make a promise or a threat you can't keep.
Exactly.
And so basically, maybe don't have your ghost walk through a bunch of mist and firework and explosives and all, then a fire or something. Make it something you can actually do inside your haunt without pissing off the fire marshal.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, make it something like that. But yeah, to make the threat vague and scary.
There's a cold mist that hits your neck.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do cold mist. Cold mist is easy.
Exactly.
You got a spritz bottle somewhere. Got a little ice water in a spritz bottle.
Exactly.
You can really fuck with some people.
You could, and you could be up in the rafters or in a hidey hole, and they would never see you.
Oh,
or just have it automated.
Actually, you could automate it, but what would be really good for that purpose? I mean, obviously, you have to be careful not to make the floor too wet because you have some fall issues. But you could get like one of those plant misters.
Mm-hmm.
It does a really fine mist, a little bit of ice water just sprayed on the back of someone's neck. Oh yeah, that'd fuck with people.
That would also feel really good.
Right now, it would feel fucking amazing. It's kind of like the sound of children's laughing.
Uh-huh.
When you're expecting it and wanting to hear it, it's the greatest thing on earth.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not expecting it and it shouldn't be there, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's just like that. But basically make it something that you can definitely deliver on and something that you can build into your haunt. Main thing is keep it simple. I mean, and the thing is, like, a lot of the ghost stories we talked about, like the Gray Lady, you expect to see a figure walking along the beach warning you to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, maybe that'd be a little difficult to do on a haunt. But what if I just said you can hear the footsteps? People say they hear their footsteps right before
You can hear the waves crashing.
Oh, yeah, you can hear the waves. You could do so much with this, especially using sound. Because you can make sound of almost anything easily.
Yeah.
Sound is one of the easiest things to bring into a haunt.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you can do a lot of great stuff here. I really do hope. So, yeah, those are the 5 elements of a good ghost story with longevity and legs. Now, how does this apply to Onionhead? And I say this knowing this podcast may end like a few minutes early, but that's okay.
Okay.
It's been a long week, and But regardless, so how does this apply to Onionhead? Well, to retell the story of Onionhead super briefly, Onionhead was, once again, there's a lot of different versions of this, so I'm just going to go with the one we heard, and the one we went to the Slidell Museum with, and sort of had in our swamp. Onionhead was a disfigured albino enslaved person who also may have had mental capacity issues. Who was ostracized by the town, and he lived with his mom in a shack way out in the outskirts somewhere. A 5-year-old girl was found murdered, and the townsfolk jumped to the conclusion, apropos of nothing, that Onionhead must have been the one to do it.
Right, because that's what you do with outcasts.
And so a mob went and hunted him down. He ran into the woods. Onionhead's mom warned him, "Don't you do it, my boy didn't do nothing." Basically said, my boy didn't do anything, leave him alone. But they didn't listen.
They found him in a ditch, curled up in a ditch.
Crying. And then the mob brutally murdered him, and according to the legend we heard, cut his body up into 13 pieces and sprinkled it around a local cemetery.
Yeah, now, the thing is that I have heard just dismembered also. But the museum did say 13 pieces. Because it's always got to be 13.
It's always got to be 13 of something, man.
Yeah.
That's kind of a weird number to cut a body into, though.
It is.
You think about like where you would separate a body. 13 isn't...
I mean, you could just cut off the fingers and a couple of toes in half.
That's true. It would be technically 13 pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it doesn't have to be big pieces.
That is true. I hadn't think of that angle. But anyways... He was dismembered, otherwise cut up, and sprinkled around. And according to the legend we heard once again, his mom was a voodoo priestess or voodoo queen, put a curse on the mob, and slowly but surely the members of the mob began dying.
Gruesome deaths.
Gruesome deaths. Not tragic deaths, because...
I found this on the web.
Siri has got a mind of her own today, man.
I know.
I don't know what her problem is. But yes, the gruesome deaths that were inexplicable. Though there were notes left at the, or elements left at the crime, different elements in different stories, that indicated this was in revenge for Onionhead's murder.
Yeah, basically at the museum what they said was that in blood, in the victim's blood, in writing was, if you were there, you're next.
Yeah.
Or I'm coming for you.
Yeah, something like that. It was some kind of writing. And at most, and nearly all of the members of the mob died that way, is supposedly the legend.
Yeah.
Now, this is a good ghost story, and let's go over the 5 elements with the context. The kernel of truth. Onionhead, it turns out, was a real person.
Yes.
And the locations in the story actually exist in the town.
They do. And there was some confusion which cemetery was supposedly sprinkled around.
Which, I mean, it's obviously going to be a challenge to find a fictional cemetery in a real town. But yeah.
Yeah, but they do figured out which one was closest to the bayou, and they think that they have it right on their website.
And they have found evidence of the shack.
Yeah.
Which Onionhead and his mom supposedly lived in.
Yeah.
So
they have photos of it.
In a state of deterioration and decay, but photos of it.
Yeah.
So the person existed. The murder and all that shit doesn't look like it happened. Nothing else happened other than he existed.
No, I think that the murder was real.
The murder of the girl was real.
Yeah.
But not the murder of Onionhead.
No, I think that was too.
Okay, well, it seems to be... I don't recall that being real.
I thought that was real, and that the cutoff point from real into mysticism was the cursing and the cutting up of the body.
Well, either way, there's kernel of truth here, though.
Yeah.
Onionhead definitely
Obviously,
exists.
there's a kernel of truth, because we're debating what the truth is.
You see, this is not a good sign, though, because we're sitting here arguing, well, not arguing, but debating what was real and what was fake in the story.
Yeah.
That's actually a good story.
Exactly.
This is actually kind of what you want. The tragedy, there were actually 2 tragedies in the story.
Mm-hmm.
You had the murder of the little girl, who was, killed by a drifter, but not Onionhead. But the brutal murder of Onionhead, too, is a tragedy.
Yeah.
The
who, going back to one of your points, was a sympathetic, innocent person who was, had acted violence upon them.
Yeah, or had, some kind of...
Tragic
act.
Because we're going back to tragedy.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Which brings us to, the supernatural element, which was, you have the mother who was allegedly a voodoo queen or someone that's very vague.
Or into, like a local medicine person who would mix herbs together.
Who otherwise placed a curse on the mob.
Yeah.
There's your supernatural element.
Mm-hmm.
The connection to a listener. Fun fact, it turns out this was historically told. The reason this legend got passed around Slidell, and really this shouldn't be a shock to anyone, the reason this got passed around Slidell was because teen boys would take their girlfriends to the cemetery for some quote-unquote cuddle time, here Gregory put it, and would tell them this story to spook them and have them get closer. Yeah. So the connection was they were literally supposedly at the cemetery where it happened.
And that Onionhead is the guardian of the cemetery.
Yeah. He is now the guardian of the cemetery, and that brings us to the expectation for today, which is that he is the guardian of the cemetery. You're supposed to see him or somehow know his presence, even though he's hundreds of years gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those 5 elements tied together, and that story has literally traveled the world 1,000 times over now. Mm-hmm. Like, I when he told us that he first heard about it in South America, despite being fairly local, that blew my mind.
Mine too.
But then again, we first heard about it from the fucking Mall of America, so what can I say?
I know, right?
What can I say? Anyway, it's just interesting to see how stories travel, and goddamn, that's a good one. Well, on that note, everyone, thank you very much for spending the past hour or so with us. We're going to wrap things up. Please check out more Haunt Weekly at hauntweekly.com, Haunt Weekly on Twitter, Haunt Weekly on Facebook, and youtube.com/Haunt Weekly is the YouTube channel. You can find us wherever you get your podcast from. But until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Crystal.
And this is Haunt Weekly episode 403, How to Write a Good Ghost Story. Next one is episode 404, a podcast not found, but B, it's time to do the news. We'll see you all then.